Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hey everyone, Dr. Anthony Chaffee here with another episode of Plant-Free MD, and here with a special guest, Sarah Kleiner, who was kind enough to have me on her podcast when I was first getting started. And it's great to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you too. Doing well. It's funny, when you were on my podcast, I was 7 weeks pregnant and it was a big secret. And you were like one of the first people I told. And now my son yesterday just turned 6 months old. So
amazing.
It's been a minute since we've chatted.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it definitely has. Well, that's great. How's that going?
So far, a little sleep deprivation, not sleeping through the night just yet. So my face is a little puffy from a little bit of sleep deprivation, but overall, he's doing really well. He really, really is. He's been just an amazing baby, and he's just doing so many awesome, fun things, and I'm enjoying it. I really am.
Yeah, great. I think during my intern year, I always thought that was a bit reminiscent of what it must be like to have a young child, because your pager can just go off at any random time and you're always just petrified that thing's going to go off, and you're like, should I go to sleep or should I just stay up, or what should I do?
Exactly.
And then you sort of start going to sleep and then it goes off again and you're just like all disoriented and you're like, oh my God, and you're just trying to figure it out. There's always some sort of emergency, then you have to get up, you have to go deal with it, and you're exhausted, and you just get a bit frazzled because you just at any point just something can just
exactly
go, and it's just you're just on edge all the time.
Exactly. I mean, eventually they start sleeping through the night, but all babies are so different. Like, I just know, having a second baby, I just knew, even though it was like 15 years later, I'm like, I just can't go into this with any expectations. And I think my brain kind of deleted a lot of the stuff that babies do in between the 15 years. But yeah, that's one of the things, like just kind of being like in a dead sleep. And then you're like, oh, okay, I got to get up and, feed the baby and make sure he's all right. And then maybe get a little more sleep. But yeah, you get that feeling sometimes, like, should I even go to sleep?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, great. So for people who don't know, you used to go by the Carnivore Yogi. Now it's Sarah Kleiner Wellness. I believe your channel. Yeah. And so for people who haven't come across you or your podcast, can you tell us a bit about you and your podcast?
Yeah. So I actually kind of started my whole profile in social media just as a joke, honestly, because I had been teaching yoga for about 12 years and was really struggling with a lot of issues that my doctor was telling me, like 39 years old, and joint pain and IBS and some skin issues. And my doctor just kept saying, this is normal. This is part of aging. And I just kind of wasn't willing to believe that. So I started searching, like we all do. And I felt like I was already doing all the right stuff. I was eating a huge amount of plants and just a little bit of meat, right? Like trying to do the Mark Hyman thing. He used to say that a lot, like use meat as a condiment. And that's what I'm doing. I'm so healthy, yet I'm bloated all the time. I'm trying to teach yoga classes and worried that I'm going to like pass gas and like completely wreck the vibe of my class, and then I was at the point where I couldn't even practice yoga the way that I enjoyed it, which is kind of more athletic, and my joints were just hurting. And so a good friend of mine, her name's Dr. Rimka. I don't know if you're familiar with her or not. She lives just a few miles away from here. I've known her for years.
Cool.
And she's a functional medicine doctor. So I reached out to her and was like, Dr. Rimka, can we do labs on me and run tests? And she's like, I could, but I've been doing this diet for the last 5 months and I've never felt so amazing in my life. And I think you should just give it a try to see if it would take care of a lot of this stuff that you're dealing with. And she told me what the diet was, which is carnivore diet. And I was like, that's literally the craziest thing I've ever heard, and stupid, no way. And then maybe like 2, 3 weeks later, I was just at this desperation point. I was just like, okay, I'm just miserable and maybe I should just give it a go. And so I did. And it was going to be just like a 30-day thing that I was going to do. And at the end of the 30 days, I felt all the issues I was having, the joint pain, the bloating, indigestion, all that stuff was gone. And then
Mhm.
my mental health was like the best it had ever been. And I'm somebody that has been on multiple antidepressants, benzodiazepines, you name it. And so I've always really just struggled with that mental health piece. And so at the end of that month, I was like, oh my gosh, my mental health is amazing. My body's amazing. And so I just kept going. And that's how I started my carnivore yogi Instagram page. It
Mhm.
was kind of a joke, in the beginning. And people were like, what is this yoga teacher who's doing carnivore? And it just kind of blossomed into what it is now. Um, so that's how it all really got started. It's kind of a funny story. I never
Yeah.
intended to create what I did, but it's been a wild ride for sure.
Oh, that's really cool. So how long have you been doing that now?
So I actually kind of stepped away a little bit from carnivore when I got pregnant
Right.
because it just, yeah, and a little bit before pregnancy, but that was the beginning of 2019. And I
Right.
did no cheating, strict carnivore for 2 solid years.
Nice.
Yeah. And like I
Yeah.
said, it was going to be just the 30-day experiment to see, if it would help me with this bloating and joint pain. And then I ended up staying on it for 2 years
Yeah.
straight with no
Yeah.
cheats. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it did help. It's
Yeah,
probably,
it did. It definitely did. Absolutely helped a lot of that stuff for sure.
yeah, very good. And what made you step away from it when you got pregnant?
Well, I actually was having some issues getting pregnant.
Hmm.
And so I started kind of diving down the rabbit hole of thyroid health and just, I was really confused as to why I kept losing pregnancies because I had two
Hmm.
miscarriages.
Oh, geez.
And they were really traumatic. And then we decided to try IVF and spent like $50,000. And 2 rounds of IVF also didn't work because a lot of people
Right.
think you do IVF, it's a guarantee, not a guarantee.
Yeah.
And so I decided my T3 was really low. And I was told by some people, maybe try. So one person told me to try carb cycling, but to eat more like sugary foods, like you need sugar. And so I tried that. It was a complete effing disaster, the worst
Mm.
advice I ever got. And so I actually just tried to do one day a week with just seasonal food, right? So
Mhm.
I started working with I was already connected with local farmers for my meat, but I started asking them, like, what do you have in season right now? And so I would just one day a week have a few things that were in season from my local farm. And that
Mhm.
was enough to bring my T3 levels up. And that wasn't the only thing, it was diving into quantum health. So I met Dr.
Mhm.
Jack Cruz, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not.
No, I don't think I've come across him yet.
Oh wow, yeah, he's a neurosurgeon. So
Oh,
I feel like
nice.
you guys we'd
Yeah.
probably get along pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I interviewed him when I was kind of in the middle of all this infertility stuff,
Hmm.
because I was convinced that it was like the food, right? I was like, it's the food. I'm doing something wrong with diet, and he was like, it's not the food. It's not the
Right.
food. It is your leptin. I'm like, what the heck is leptin, right?
Hmm.
What does leptin have to do with anything with fertility or hormones? And he's like, leptin is the master circadian signaling hormone that controls your fertility, that controls your immune system, that controls your insulin, that controls all of these functions in your body. And if your leptin is not in optimal range, you're not going to be able to get pregnant. And so
Yeah.
I kind of stopped freaking out so much about the food, right? And dove a little bit more into quantum health and circadian biology. So, what that looked like for me was sunrise every single day, UVA exposure every single day. Because I'm sure you know, as a neurosurgeon, that we've got the suprachiasmatic nucleus that responds to light coming in the retina. So, my circadian rhythms were crap, right? And if you want to have optimal leptin levels, you need to give the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is attached to the hypothalamus, the correct signaling for those hormones to turn on at those specific times, because we synthesize pregnenolone, serotonin, dopamine, all of these things in UVA light, right? So if you're not getting those correct light signals, you're going to continue to struggle with hormones, right? Even if you do have an optimized diet, which is where I felt like I was at. So to get pregnant, I kind of stepped back a little bit from all the diet stuff. I still stayed like mostly carnivore, with that 1 day a week of having the seasonal carbs. That was enough combined with the circadian stuff to get my T3 back to normal range. And then I just worked on improving my mitochondrial health. So Dr. Cruz was like, you need cold plunging, you need grounding, you need sunlight, you need to get your vitamin D levels up. And so that just kind of cracked my head open a bit, and I started doing all these things, and boom, got pregnant without IVF January of 2022.
Nice.
After spinning my wheels on, do I need to do this specific diet and step away from this? And it ended up just being something completely different than I thought it was. And when we think about food, what makes the most sense ancestrally, right, is still going to be primarily a meat-based diet. That's how our brains and bodies, that's how we got here. And seasonal local produce, if that's appropriate for you, right, may not be appropriate for everybody. Ended up helping me, but again, not necessarily the thing, right? We look so much at the this perfect amount of carb, this perfect amount of this, that, and that. It's like, no, you got to look deeper than that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it worked out, and that's very interesting about Dr. Cruz, and it's great to see someone who is traditionally trained doctor saying, hey, you need to get grounding and blue light blocking and cold therapy and all these sorts of things, and but there's more and more and more data coming out showing that these things actually do work and do help. So it actually is some evidence-based practice in medicine.
Oh yeah, Cruz doesn't talk about anything that he doesn't back up with ample scientific data. I mean, you listen to him talk, you're like, whoa, I need to rewind that about 6 times, but he will throw out a study for everything that he's talking about. And the things that we've been told by society that are going to improve fertility are mostly BS, right? CoQ10 supplements, eating a plant-based diet. No, those things are not ultimately at the end of the day what ended up helping me, and that have ended up helping. I've helped a lot of women at this point now since I've come out and talked about my story. Those are not the things that have been able to help people improve their fertility and hormone balance at all.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, the Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. But for those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
And there's a lot of little things that just we wouldn't even think of that could make a difference. But I saw a study recently that my brother sent me. It was a study done in mice, and they gave them an equivalent amount of stevia that you'd find in like a soft drink, right? And so like equivalent for them, so like one soft drink for us, equivalent for them. And just the one dose of stevia in these lab mice reduced their fertility 5%. And the control group had a 100% fertility rate. And then the ones with stevia had a 45% fertility rate. So interesting. I don't know if that's doing the same thing to us, but it's certainly something to think about. We're putting a bunch of weird chemicals in our body that are not supposed to be there, and weird things can happen. These are not just, well, it's not a carb, so it's not a calorie, so it doesn't count.
Right.
and it has a chemical reaction in our body, and you don't know exactly what that is. We just think of it as taste, but like there's more that goes on. I mean, you put something in your stomach that's going to be absorbed, or it could be absorbed, and you don't know exactly what it's going to do to you if it's not something that we're naturally designed to have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what we have to look at when we're putting things into our body is how is it going to affect the mitochondria? Everything this whole fertility journey that I went on made me open up my mind to mitochondrial health. And how does that work? You know, I always say it's called the electron transport chain, not the calorie transport chain, you know, because everyone's like calories in, calories out, or eat this specific food is going to do this specific thing. And I'm like, you know, if you have poor mitochondrial function, it's the essential, you know, it's looking at a car that has a hole in the gas tank trying to drive around, you know, with gas leaking out everywhere. You've got to work on fixing your mitochondria. And, you know, I think eating a local seasonal diet that's heavily made up of meat, and if you want to just eat meat, that it can be super supportive, or is super supportive to mitochondrial health, because the body kind of understands food is light code, right? And so if we're putting in stevia, right, what kind of signal are we sending? If we're putting in, if we're living in Canada and we're eating tropical fruit, if we're eating mangoes and all these foods that, you know, people that live in these tropical areas are saying you need these foods for your thyroid, but you're living in Canada, what kind of signal are you sending your body? Your body doesn't know what to do with that. So food is light code, you know, and our body needs that information. Food is information, right? That our body needs to interpret. And so if we're constantly putting in processed foods, we're putting in these foods. I know you've talked with, Dr. Boros, right?
Yeah.
The high deuterium foods, right? So for all these foods, and our body in the wintertime has less ability to deplete deuterium. So we're eating all these high deuterium foods that's slowing down our mitochondrial function. What is that doing to our health? You know, if we look at most disease is rooted in poor mitochondrial health. So it's such a bigger conversation than just like this kale is going to help you, or this, you know, this thing's going to, it's like, well, is it local? Is it seasonal? Does it make sense? Is it as something that my body can interpret and understand? Yeah.
And also, I mean, with the seasonal thing, you know, even if a mango is in season, like what did that is that the original mango? Was that the mango that 50,000 years ago? No, I mean, these things are bred modified, different, have a ton of sugar in them. You know, they're genetically modified in a number of ways, either in the lab or just, you know, in the field through intensive breeding. And so, you know, the idea that it's well, you have to have this thing. Well, that thing didn't exist when we were coming up, you know.
Right.
So I don't know how you have to have something that didn't exist.
Right. And then you look back at leptin, you know, which is the signaler to insulin and you know, controls really your metabolic health. If you are leptin resistant, you have high levels of leptin, you have no business eating a mango, even if it's growing in your backyard, because that is going to elevate your leptin levels, right? Which is going to create more confusion in the body. That when your leptin is elevated that way, and you have poor metabolic health, the communication between the stored energy on your body and your brain is not happening, right? That's supposed the leptin's supposed to dock to the hypothalamus when we sleep at night, at midnight, every night, to say, you know, Sarah has X amount of energy on her body. So tomorrow we need to output this much energy, be hungry for this much food. So it's going to signal your thyroid, your metabolism, all this stuff. But if you're stuffing your face, if you already have elevated leptin, you're stuffing your face with mango, and you're keeping your insulin up, because, you know, insulin competes with leptin for that docking space at the hypothalamus. So if you have chronically elevated insulin, that energy information download is not going to happen. So, you know, I get so many people, I don't know if you probably don't, because people kind of know what you're all about. Since I've changed my name to Sarah Kleiner Wellness, I've been getting a ton of pro-metabolic people that come to my page, and they're like, are you familiar with the whole pro-metabolic thing?
No, maybe not. Is that?
No. It's like Ray Peat. Do you know who Ray Peat is?
No, I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So they target carnivore and keto people, and they say, you have ruined your whole body and you're stressed out. And to fix this, you need to eat orange juice with raw milk, and you need to eat 6 meals a day, and you need to have sugar at every single meal because sugar is going to help. It's wild. And so
like
they kind of target.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's insane. And people, they buy it. They're like, oh, I've messed up my metabolism. I need to start doing this. I need to have a bedtime snack. And then they gain 30 pounds and they're pre-diabetic, right? And their hormones are worse. And I try to explain this whole story of leptin to them because people get so caught up in the food dogma and in the food wars. And I'm like, look, if you have elevated leptin levels, if you're leptin resistant, the last thing you need to be doing is eating food that's going to increase your insulin and keep it elevated. That's the last thing you need to do, because your body is never, your hormones are never going to regulate. Your weight is never going to regulate, because that energy information download is not going to happen, because insulin's going to be chronically elevated. Leptin's never going to have the chance to dock to your brain and say, hey, this is how much stored energy we have, So it's crazy how caught up people get in these things. And I'm like, it's a lot more simple than you guys want to understand.
Yeah. And, that's good that you say, talk about the insulin, blocking out the binding sites, because that's true. Insulin, blocks out leptin, and so your brain can't see this major satiety.
How much you've got.
Yeah. Fructose also independently blocks that out as well. And when you're eating, sugary, fructose heavy, rich carbs, now you're compounding that. So you're not only, it's not only the insulin, but now it's the insulin and the fructose. And so fructose generally comes with glucose. And so the glucose is jacking up your insulin, and eventually your fructose can jack up your insulin, but the fructose itself is blocking the leptin as well. And so you get very bad issues. When I see people in my, outside of neurosurgery, I do functional medicine practice, and we have a lot of people that are metabolically unwell, and that's exactly they come to us, but a lot of them are trying to lose weight as well. And we obviously use a lot of diet and lifestyle interventions to help that. And we do a deep dive into their bloods and look at these things. Quite a lot of these people have extraordinarily raised leptins. They have severe leptin resistance. So normally you want your leptin, sort of, in Australia, it's sort of so between 4 and 6. You routinely see people, up towards 100, and it's out at 100, and so it just says it's like over 100. There are a lot of bariatric medicine doctors, weight loss doctors, and weight loss surgeons that will tell you that if your leptin goes above 100, it doesn't matter what you do, you cannot lose weight without surgery. That's what they'll tell you. And I have patients that put them on a carnivore diet, or even a ketogenic diet, but most of them we are able to get them on a carnivore diet, and they do very well, and able to help a lot of other things, because it's generally not just that. Generally they're coming in with autoimmune.
Leptin signals the immune system. So most people that have an autoimmune issue also have a leptin issue. It's like I said, it's a master signaling hormone, and it affects your heart, your immune system, it's not just your weight, it's your hormones, sex hormones, all that stuff. So it's
very important. Yeah. And, we have patients that, will be up towards 100 or even over 100, and they'll say, oh, you can't lose weight. And they do lose weight. It's slower for them though.
It's harder.
Much harder. Yeah. But they do it. And the main thing is they get better. Their autoimmune conditions go into remission, and they feel a lot better. And then slowly but surely that leptin comes down. And when that leptin comes down to, more normal level, that's when you see the weight just start sloping off of them. And, one lady, her leptin's over 100. We have no idea how high it is, because it just says over 100. And even after the last 3 months on a carnivore diet, she has multiple autoimmune issues. And she's great. And it's great. She has rheumatoid arthritis as well as Crohn's and a few other things. And her rheumatologist is all for her trying a carnivore diet and doing that. But she's just like, I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to track this. I don't know what your hormones and what your cholesterol mean in this context. So I'm just going to leave that to, Dr. Chaffee, but happy with what you're doing. And so that's great. It's great that she has that support, and she feels amazing. And so she's off all her medications and doing great. Her leptin is still over 100, but she has actually started losing weight as well. But she's just like, I'm not really worried about it. I don't really care if I lose weight at this point. I just feel amazing, and I'm off my meds, and that's what's important to me. So she has the right attitude, just focusing on her health, focusing on getting better. And, eventually that will come down, and eventually even more things will get better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a long-term solution, as well as, seeing immediate effects. You definitely see some short-term benefits in your health and how you feel generally, if you sort of troubleshoot different things. But there's also these long-term effects, because eventually that leptin will come down, her other hormones will heal as well, and she'll be doing even better.
Yeah, it's really crazy that, when I went through everything I went through with fertility, endocrinologists, functional medicine doctors, I spent $100,000 in 2021 trying to, so I really wanted this baby. I really wanted the baby. And everyone's like, well, it's because you're in your 40s. When I gave birth, I was 43. And everyone's like, it's just because you're in your 40s that you can't get pregnant, and it's nothing else to do with anything else. You don't, and I was just not willing to believe that. So I was like, when I met Dr. Cruz, and he was like, listen, if you want to get pregnant, you need to understand leptin. I was like, done. I am going to study the hell out of this. I'm going to do everything I can. And he has what's called a leptin prescription on his website. He's like, look at my leptin prescription. So I went to his blogs, read all of those, read all the scientific research, and I kind of adapted his leptin program for women and for myself. And I wasn't dieting, right? I was still eating, like I needed to eat good, because my goal was fertility. My goal was not weight loss. But what ended up happening is the first month I started sleeping better. I had more energy, just kind of implementing this leptin protocol. I took his and kind of adapted it more to women, because his is based off of like a 300-pound man. So it's like super aggressive, right? So I'm like, let me see if I can fix this with my nutritionist background and all that, and health coaching background for women. And what ended up happening, month 1, I didn't lose any weight. Month 2, my leptin levels got in that optimal range, and I dropped 30 pounds without trying. It was like, what the heck? Because, the whole fertility journey and just all that stuff, it's stressful. You can gain some weight even if you're not eating a bunch of crap. So ended up dropping 30 pounds just from getting my leptin in normal range, and then ended up getting pregnant not too long after that. And so I think it's one of those things most people have never heard of, but working on that can be remarkably helpful. And like you said, the leptin is going to signal your hormones. It signals your immune system. It signals your insulin. It signals so many things. Even your heart health and bone health is connected to leptin. And so when people can kind of work on that, it can make huge shifts. I've had people, because I took that protocol, I saved it, I did it on myself, and then I started doing it with clients. And then a year later, I created a 21-day leptin reset program. And so I have this program that people do now, and I'll get messages daily. My antibodies, my Hashimoto's antibodies went from over 1,000 down to under 100. And all I did was your program. I'm like, yep, that's... but people do balk a little bit, because I tell them, we can't, if you have that high leptin, we're not doing carbs, we are going to do some carb restriction. And they're like, oh, that's going to ruin my thyroid and blah, blah. I'm like, it's probably not. It's probably going to help things.
Yeah.
But people are so brainwashed with this, fructose and sugar kind of thing of being like health promoting, and plants being health promoting. So yeah,
which plants too? I mean, they always just say plants, eat more, fruits and vegetables. Well, which one?
Right.
Like,
I like to I just watch these days. I used to get involved in like arguments and I just kind of watch. There's this popular influencer I follow that she does a lot of stuff with like lymphatic system. I've started following like less carnivore people and just kind of more like interested in this topic and this topic. And so I was following her and she was doing medical medium protocol. She was all gung ho about it. And she's, got 100 and some thousand followers. And she's like, my energy's been bad. I'm going to do this medical medium protocol. And 2 weeks in, she was writing in her stories that she had to stop because she was suddenly having joint pain, all the symptoms of oxalate poisoning, essentially. And I was just kind of like, yep. It's not once again, not the answer, my friends.
Yeah. And it is just funny. They just say just any plants, just any old plants. And it's like, no, like clearly not, most plants on earth are inedible. So
right.
Not just any plant. And I was asking them, oh, you need more plants with more leafy greens. I was like, okay, then why do you go to the grocery store? Why don't you just go into the park and just like, harvest a bunch of leaves, make a salad out of that. If plants are just the answer and they don't have anything harmful in them, why do you spend money at the grocery store? This should, right. You should just have free food every single day. I have yet to get an answer to that. I usually
right.
Conversation like in the comment section of whatever the hell I'm, upset about, oh my God. I was just like, okay, then why do you even bother? Why do you pay for this sort of crap when you can just get it? Just eat your yard clippings, why do you compost them? Why don't you just eat them, But, of course, people do understand that some plants are poisonous and then they just forget that fact as well. It's sort of that double think sort of thing where they can hold two things in their head. It's like, oh yeah, well, no, so you can't eat, most plants because you can't eat those things because they're deadly. But then those ones that come in a package that come in a store, those are, those can't have anything in them. Like who told
right.
Like, it wasn't a botany professor. That's who.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny. I mean, the brainwashing goes so deep because when I was pregnant, my husband was like, well, you're going to eat vegetables when you're pregnant, right? And I'm like, why would I do that? Like, what does a pregnant woman need? She needs tons of egg yolks for the choline, for the brain. She needs wild seafood, DHA, brain development. She needs B12, all the things that we can get in red meat. Those are the foods I focused on in pregnancy. It was not like kale salads and celery juice. And I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. And my body didn't crave those things either, it's crazy. And then you look at pregnancy websites where they're like, you make sure you're getting all of your folate. Like, why would you not just eat some liver to get your folate? Get some organ meats to get those B vitamins and folate. And I didn't take prenatal vitamins either. And it's crazy. The placenta, my doula, she has helped deliver babies that were vegetarian, vegan. She looked at my placenta and she was like, she was like taking pictures of it. She was like, holy crap, this thing is huge. It's beautiful. It's robust. And I was like, yep, that's meat, egg yolks. Yeah. Did a little bit of raw dairy, all the organ meats, all that stuff. And, it left my son on the cord for 10 minutes, didn't clip the cord immediately, did delayed cord clamping until the cord turned white. And,
nice. Yeah,
everyone was like, oh, he's going to have jaundice. Cause my daughter had jaundice. They're like, oh, he's definitely gonna have jaundice. And I'm like, no, he won't. He's going to be fine. He's not gonna have jaundice. Not gonna be problems. He'll be fine. And, no jaundice, no nothing. And we were able to go home 24 hours after the delivery. They let us leave, which was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. There's that video making the rounds.
Yeah. Dr. Saladino did that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where they show like the vegan placenta and just a normal, standard diet, placenta, but just included meat. Very different. The vegan one was like very pale, very anemic looking. They were talking about the consistency of it was a bit, worse. It was like hardened and calcified. It was just like, didn't have very nice physical, attributes to it. And, and that, may be one of the reasons, maybe others, that, vegans, vegetarians have higher rates of miscarriage as well. If the placenta isn't developing properly, that's not going to be able to support baby, unfortunately. And, so it's, when you see just clear anatomical differences like that, it should tell you something, and for you, it told you that whatever you were doing was very, very healthy, which is good.
Yeah. And now he's 6 months. So we're starting with like some first foods. And it's funny, my pediatrician is like, and I have to go to the more standard doctors to kind of please my husband, because he's still very, allopathically minded in some ways. So I wanted to do a home birth, but our compromise was a hospital that's like an hour away from our house that allows for all the weird natural stuff that I wanted, delayed cord clamping and water birth and all that. So we almost didn't make it to the hospital on time. I almost had the baby in the car. It was like 9 centimeters dilated when I got there.
Oh, wow.
My labor was just like, really, I almost had the baby in the car. But we have a pediatrician. And so we went for his, visit, and she's like, okay, it was time for foods. So, green beans, she's telling me all these plant foods. And I'm like, doing bone marrow, doing like lamb chops, like meat on the bone, like letting him chomp on some meat. Like, I'm not trying to introduce like all these, green beans and stuff like that. I mean, I'll probably do some of those just to make sure he doesn't have allergies and stuff like that. But things I'm focusing on giving him as first foods are the bone marrow, the meat on the bone, egg yolks, things like that. That's what we're focusing on. Because it's when you look at like Weston A. Price and you look at these different cultures of the cultures that had more meat and that lived more ancestrally, you see the jaw development, you see just their overall health being improved. But the standard messaging is still, even with babies, like, let's give them a bunch of plants first. Like, not once was it mentioned to me to try something like bone marrow. I mean, my son loves bone marrow, like loves it.
Nice.
And I feel like that's a perfect first food,
It is.
But your pediatrician's not going to tell you that.
Extraordinarily nutritious.
Yep.
Another one, my great grandfather, he was a doctor. He got his medical license in the 1890s, and he went to Columbia, and he's like second class at Columbia, taught sterile practice. So he was right at the beginning, the birth of modern surgery. He was a surgeon, and they just figured out anesthetics, and they just figured out sterile technique. And so he was right there on the floor figuring out all the new things you could do now that we could go into different parts of the body. Very cool stuff. But he told my mom when she was young that like one of the best things for a young baby who hasn't eaten solids yet is like the juices from the roast, like the meat juices from the roast,
Yep.
And you have that, and you drink that, and you get them, give them a taste for blood, and they watch their eyes light up. And it has all these, it has these really nice nutrients, all these good, it has iron and all these different, B vitamins and everything that you need. And it gives them that taste and starts getting them used to like, oh, okay, hey, this is what food tastes like.
Right.
With that, I want some of that,
Yep. Yeah, that's what we've got going on right now upstairs. I've got a roast cooking, and I plan on giving him some of the drippings and letting him just kind of have little bits of the roast, and he loves that. So if you start them, breast milk is the healthiest thing. You do the breast milk, and then you can add in some of these things that are their first foods. You're training their taste buds, you're training them for life. And a lot of kids become addicted to sugar before they're even able to have foods because they've been on the formulas. And, not everyone can do the breastfeeding. It is hard. Now I'm doing it here again in my 40s, breastfeeding. It's very taxing on your body. It's a very expensive metabolic process. It's hard. It takes a lot of dedication. So anyone out there, I don't want to shame them if that's what they have to do to keep their baby alive. I get it. But unfortunately, most of the formulas that you're going to find are loaded with seed oils and sugar. And it's like you get them already addicted to sugar before they've even turned one, before they've had a chance. And And we see all these health problems with children now.
Yeah. And I read a study years ago, when I was first sort of realized that, well, asking the question, could autism be related to diet or early, nutrition? And sure enough, I sort of wondered if maybe sugar was a part of that. And sure enough, there was a study looking at kids who breastfed versus bottle fed. And the ones who bottle fed had a far higher rate of autism than the ones who breastfed. And obviously you can pump, they didn't distinguish between people that pumped and used study. It was just bottle fed or, predominantly or not. But most of the time people do, use formula, especially if they're only using, bottle feeding, because, the milk would have not, if you use it or lose it with milk supply.
Right.
Yeah. And so, if they're just going to bottle fed, then there's probably only bottle feeding with formula. So, that was interesting. Women that had higher saturated fat intake and higher LDL cholesterol during pregnancy had lower rates of autism in their kids. And women who ate more red meat for the 3 months pre-conception had lower rates of kids with autism as well. And we're also seeing a ketogenic diet in general, be it carnivore or anything or any other, can significantly help, mitigate or even reverse the features and symptoms of autism. So I think it's very much related to diet, and at least heavily influenced by it. And, if you don't care about your kid and about them, their development as much, then there's something wrong, And so obviously, like, this is something that matters, getting them animal source nutrition and a lot of meat and fatty meat, and limiting out the unnatural foods. Seed oils did not exist 100 years ago. How can we, something that we need? Now, maybe you can argue that it's not all that bad. Maybe it's similar. Maybe, but it did not exist 50,000 years ago. And so our bodies definitely don't have to have it. This is not a required nutrient. It exists as a nutrient even 100 years ago. What did exist 50,000 years ago and 100 years ago is animal fats. And that's is essential, that we do need. And certainly children need it as well, especially when they're developing, especially for their brain and nervous system.
Yeah, it all goes back to the correct signals going into our body that the body can interpret and understand and utilize. And if the body doesn't understand signal of a seed oil because it's not natural, it's not grown under natural light, it's like, what the heck is this, right? It's just a confusing signal for the body. And our body is always looking for, the mitochondria are always looking for information, right? Is this danger? Do I sense danger? Can I make enough pregnenolone to support my body? Can I support my hormones, or do I need to shut down? Right. The mitochondria is always looking for these signals, and, food, another light input signal is either telling your body danger, this is foreign, we don't know what this is, or this is something that we understand what to do with, which kind of goes back to the whole plant thing. If you're going to eat a plant, then do it the right way. You need to find out, was it sprayed with chemicals? Is it local to my environment? Is it seasonal? Does that even make sense? Is my body going to know how to interpret this? Right? Because going, and I was just talking with a lady last night. The cool thing about me changing my profile from Carnivore Yogi to Sarah Kleiner Wellness is it's opened up a lot of people. Like I've attracted a lot more people to my page. And so I get questions now that I never used to get before. Everyone was always like, how do you do carnivore, and how much protein and how much fat? And just like, I know you get those questions. How much fat should I eat? How much protein? And you're like, okay. But I get people now that are like, should I do juicing? Should I have smoothies? I'm like, no, don't do that. And I can explain these things to people again. I'm enjoying having those conversations again, because it's like, no, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. You want to improve your thyroid health. Your thyroid doesn't know what to do with 4 pounds of kale, that's going to actually cause more issues for your thyroid.
Yeah. And there was, and it does. Oh God, what is the chemical? Kale actually
Glyphosate.
Goitrogen, so it has.
Goitrogen. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Can
so
damage the
it has
thyroid.
chemicals in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that damages the thyroid and stops it from working properly. So I'd heard that kale had like they tried to feed it to cows, and the cows like really didn't. So they tried to just like foist it on us. And I mean, kale looks. I mean, that's a prehistoric looking plant. It looks like something a brontosaurus is going to eat, and like it's very unpalatable. And I learned too before all this big push on eating kale was the largest purchaser of kale in America was Pizza Hut.
Nuh-uh.
I swear to God, because they used it as garnish, as decoration around the outside of their salad bar. You just have this green ridge around there. No one ate it. No, it was not for eating. It was not for anybody's consumption. It was just as a garnish. So it was most heavily bought as a garnish, and you're not supposed to eat that shit. You don't eat the garnish, and unless you're just like, ravenous. But like, but yeah, so they gave kale to cows, and then the kids who were getting the milk were getting big goiters, and they were getting thyroid failure because this goitrogen was going through into the milk because the cows couldn't process it, couldn't detoxify it, couldn't get rid of it, and it went into the milk. And then people were getting goiters and thyroid failure from that. So like I said, well, you can't just eat that. You're going to ruin your thyroid. I'm like, no, that's exactly what you want to eat, or else you will ruin your thyroid and you eat a bunch of kale and damage your thyroid and kidney stones and do all other sorts of nasty things to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. That's like the girl I was watching do the medical medium protocol. I'm like, that is not the way. That is not the way.
and that's the thing. The medical medium, correct me if I'm wrong, but someone was telling me this is actually like a medium, like that speaks to spirits and has a spirit.
Right.
That tells
no medical training, nothing. And he basically gets like downloads to give out health information. And I think
from the spirit world.
Right. Like, and then he's like millions of followers. It's so ridiculous. This lady I follow, she's a friend of mine, Coach Tara Garrison. I don't know if you've heard of her before, but she did a reel, I guess it was a couple months ago, where she was watching a live stream of his and like screen recorded it. And he was actually telling people on this live stream that eggs have sugar in them and eggs create insulin resistance. Someone with like millions. Yeah. And people were like, eating it up. Like, I'm like, wait, what? People believe that eggs have sugar and they create insulin resistance? No, stop. Like we're in 2023 and this is an actual like health guru telling people this and they're believing it. Like I was shocked.
I mean, that's malpractice,
right? Well, he's not even a doctor.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if he was, it would be. And like,
right.
Going around like spreading that sort of thing, there's one thing. I mean, people will say that I'm, selling snake oil and all that sort of crap too. And that's fine, but I can back it up. I actually have evidence.
You do.
Yeah. All sorts of heaps and heaps and heaps of evidence. So I'm fine. This is all evidence-based medicine. None of this is conjecture. That's purely made up. I mean, he's not even saying, hey, I got this from a study, even if it's like some crappy study or something like that. He's saying, I got this from my spirit guide. My spirit guide told me there's glucose in eggs and it causes insulin resistance. That is the most retarded thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And the fact that people would actually believe that blows my mind.
Yeah, people were totally believing it. And then I've had other people comment on my posts like, oh, don't you know eggs are dangerous? They have sugar. I'm like, oh my gosh, eggs are so important for our health. Like they're a major superfood, like a total superfood. I was eating pregnant like 12 eggs a day,
Yeah.
You need that choline.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Well, the choline is brilliant. I mean, there have been a number of papers now showing that the essential nature of choline for brain development, brain function, but especially, brain development. So when you're pregnant, breastfeeding and early childhood and adolescence and adulthood, you need choline. You need a lot. and it's very, very important. And so egg yolks are a great source of that. And, they are a superfood. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is going to be animal life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has everything in there to grow a life. And so, what is that telling you? Like, you're trying to get the nutrients to grow and build and maintain animal tissue and brain and neural tissue. This has everything. This egg yolk is everything that is going to then turn into, animal life, which is, bone, muscle, tissue, and brain. So why are we messing around here? Why are we suggesting that the components of that egg, somehow, oh, no, that causes disease, it causes cancer, it'll turn into all these, it turns into a chicken. That's what it turns into. It doesn't turn into a ball of cancer and atherosclerosis. I mean, what an absolutely foolish thing to think that it would happen.
Right. It's wild. Like I said, the level of brainwashing that people have undergone is insane. And it takes a lot. I mean, even people that do more of a meat-based approach, it takes a lot to undo that, because like I said, I'm getting a lot more people now that come to my page and come to my programs that don't know my background, don't know I was the carnivore yogi and that I ate nothing but meat for 2 years straight with no cheats. And, so they don't know how heavily I depend on animal foods and recommend them, that people eat them. And so when I try to have these conversations with them about food, I can get a lot of pushback now since I've made that shift. And, I had a girl who's looking to get pregnant. She actually lives in Costa Rica, right? So I always talk about local seasonal foods, but her leptin is like a 68. And I'm like, I know you live near all these fruits, but you can't eat them right now. Right now, if you want to get pregnant, if you want to improve your fertility, this level of 68 with your leptin, you cannot be doing it. And so finally, I talked her into limiting these foods, right? Slowing down on them, go slowly, and then we can just kind of go all the way. And now she has lost already 10 pounds. She's sleeping better. She's like all the things, everything. I'm like, we're getting you now there. We're moving towards that direction. But she's like, how am I going to be able to get pregnant if I'm not eating all these? I'm like, they're not essential. Let's look at essential vitamins, nutrients, macronutrients, all these things for pregnancy and just for the human body, period. You're not missing out on anything essential by not eating some of these foods, and we can even just look at it as like temporary thing, right? Like, let's get you pregnant, let's get you healthy, and yeah, go ahead if you want to, but I don't really recommend it.
Yeah. It's one thing with like all the sort of the brainwashing we had for the last 40 years, 50 years, telling us about cholesterol and meat's bad and things like that enough. But at least that tide's coming around. But now you have people like the medical medium just really just throwing just rocks into
what the hell does that even mean?
What do you do? That blows my mind. When someone told me about that, I was just really blown away. And now every time I see that, someone's just will comment on something I say. It's rare. I don't get a bunch of hecklers or sort of vegan extremists or anything like that. Most people are pretty positive. And even people that are vegan, quite often they'll ask real questions and we'll have a good discussion, which is great. And every now and then you get some,
awesome.
Just blasts and says stupid things, but there's always going to be those people. And then it's just some of these people that say that and they're just like, oh, this is ridiculous. You need to look at the medical medium. Like that's obvious. I was like, so you're saying that all this stuff, and I've listed out all the papers and studies in the descriptions, gone through them by name, listing the authors and the dates of publications and things like that. And you're saying that that's quackery, but the who talks to his the dead spirit guide, that guy, that's scientific based. That's hard science. Like, you have lost something very critical in your grasp of reality, and like you need to find it, before we continue this conversation.
Exactly.
It's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. People believe what they want to believe though. So
Yeah. Well,
you can only do your best to, I always say it's attraction, not promotion. And, that's kind of how it has to be, is people come to you and they're ready to hear it and ready to do it. It's hard to get someone to make a shift if they're not really ready for it. If they're still comfortable enough where they are. And that's where I had to get to try carnivore. As I was just miserable. Like nothing was working. I felt terrible. And I just was like, all right, I'm desperate enough to just do this. Cause it's not easy mentally, we have all these, again, we've got all the voices telling us you need these specific foods to stay healthy. And then it does take some willpower and some determination to get off of a lot of those foods that are maybe addictive, that you don't even realize are super addictive. I'm like this morning before I jumped on here, I'm trying to help a friend of mine who is in her 40s and her hormones are a disaster and her cycles are super painful and horrible, and trying to get her to get off the oatmeal. I'm like having these like conversations about oatmeal. I'm like, am I really talking about oatmeal like this with this much conviction? But I think I finally got her. I had to get her off the oatmeal and off the nuts and seeds. I'm like, let's do that. She's like, so you eat meat at every meal? I'm like, yeah. She's like, how do you do that? I'm like, you just cook it and you just eat it.
Fork? Yeah.
Right. Like you just eat it. Like what do you eat for meat? What do you eat for lunch? Have some meat. What do you have for dinner? Have some meat. Like it's not, it's not complicated. You don't need a meal plan. You don't need recipes. It's not, people want to just overcomplicate, but I'm like, get off the nuts and seeds and the oatmeal and the grains and all this stuff. And let me know how that goes for you. Let me know how you're feeling in a couple weeks. Let me know if you're still having bloating and indigestion, and if you still have painful, awful, horrible periods. Let's see how this shifts. And I'm willing to bet money you're going to see a big difference.
Yeah, especially oats as well. Oats have a ton of
glyphosate, anti-nutrients,
acetic acid, things like that. Like, not good for you. And
no,
and I mean, the idea that you're going to be less bloated by eating a bunch of fiber and oats and wheat and things like that. It's so funny to me. Is, oh, you need that for good digestion or whatever. Trust me, like you don't. And like as soon as you stop, all of a sudden, like, oh, this is what good digestion feels like. I had no idea.
Right. Yeah. I did a post for April Fool's Day, and I said the top 3 foods for leptin resistance. And I said oatmeal, a French baguette, and tofu. It was an April Fool's post, right?
Yeah.
And most people were like laughing. They're like, holy, and I had like all these scientific explanations. Then I was like, read caption. And then in the caption, like April Fool's, like, please don't eat these foods, like explain why. I had tons of people that are laughing. This is so funny. You had me going. I was like, who am I following? Like, what page am I actually following? But then I had like a good amount of comments from people who were like, I thought oatmeal was healthy. What's wrong with tofu? Like only one person questioned me on the bread. I'm like, okay, good. At least only one person questioned me on the bread. What if I bake the bread myself? I'm like,
what? Like,
it's just still not.
Your oven's better than someone else's. Like,
I don't know. But I think it opened up some dialogue for me to talk about, why oatmeal is not optimal, why tofu is not optimal if you're trying to reverse leptin resistance. Not for so many reasons, not a good idea, Yeah.
Well, and that's good too, that you're reaching a wider audience as well. Sort of like you're almost like a, like a double agent, behind.
Yeah, exactly. Get you in. Then I tell you about the meat.
She does yoga. She does this. Oh, this is perfect. Let's talk about quinoa, and like, it's just going to be great. No, not here.
Nope, not doing that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I mean, and the good thing about that too is, yes, you're going to have more, pain in the ass conversations and having to deal with a lot of people, coming after you. But at the same time, you'll get to have those conversations with people who need to hear it. And
right. That's how I feel.
Preaching to the choir, you'll be able to get this out there and be like, well, actually, there's more information here that, maybe you weren't aware about. Check these things.
Right. Yeah, when it was carnivore yoga, I was kind of in this echo chamber, everyone's like, yeah, meat, da, da, da. And now I've kind of widened. And since I quit being carnivore yogi, I've picked up an additional, I want to say like, I think like 40,000 followers since then on Instagram.
Nice.
So that's 40,000 people who didn't know me as a carnivore yogi. So that's just like I see as opportunity to educate people on these things and really and help them understand in a way that's maybe not as abrasive as being like the carnivore yogi.
Yeah.
And I'll like look every now and then at who's following me, and I'll get like vegan Sally or like plantsaregood.com. Like I'm like, okay, so I'm attracting some vegetarians, vegans, because a lot of what I talk about now is circadian biology and leptin. And if you look at those things on the surface, you don't understand even circadian biology. Meat is a huge component of that, right? Because meat is available year round. Like meat is a food that's always going to be a circadian friendly food to eat. You know, there's a circadian component to that. There's a huge leptin component to that. And so people kind of come to my page wanting to learn more about those things. And then I kind of slip that nutritional information in there to them.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I mean, obviously, you talk a lot about leptin, which is great. Can you take us through some of the things that you do on the 21-day leptin protocol? Absolutely.
So it's important because leptin is a circadian signaling hormone, and it docks the hypothalamus at night, that we really look at our meal timing. It's very important. And food is also a secondary circadian signal. So light is really what I have people start focusing on, because when you're getting that morning light, you are turning on those hormonal cascades, right? The body is like, okay, let's make an appropriate amount of cortisol, for this time of day. You don't get this huge cortisol rise from drinking coffee and looking at your phone, which is what most people do. So I'm like, you don't have to quit coffee. I would like it if you would, but if you're going to drink it, I need you to do all these other things first, right? So going outside, seeing the sun, no glasses, no contacts. If you want to be grounded, bare feet, it's going to be a bonus. You're going to be pulling more electrons into your body. So that's going to improve your mitochondrial function, your blood flow, all of that. Then I want you to eat, and I want you to eat a very nice protein rich meal. So, and breakfast, I don't have everyone do carnivore in the program or straight carnivore through the whole thing. They can, it's an option, but breakfast, I think, is important that it's a carnivore meal or a high fat keto meal. At least 30 grams protein. For men, they can eat more, but I really would appreciate if people eat like a high quality meat with a good amount of fat. So you start the day off, stabilize your blood sugar, because what a lot of people end up doing is they'll wake up, look at their phone, right? So you get the signal when you look at your phone that you're through, again, that mechanism of the retina and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, telling your brain to create a specific or synthesize a specific amount of cortisol in response to light. Your phone is 5,700 kelvins, right? Your sunrise is about 1,600 kelvins. And so understanding how the HPA axis works, how that whole system works, do not look at your phone, go outside, get that natural signal of sun, and then reinforce that circadian signal of food, because again, food's a Zeitgeber. It's a secondary circadian signal. So we're going to eat a nice protein, fat-rich breakfast. It's going to stabilize your blood sugar so that your cortisol doesn't just shoot up and your adrenals are exhausted from this, like what most people do is the phone, the coffee, and then they might eat later or they might wait till noon, right? So that's stressing out your adrenals, creating a cortisol issue. And what people don't understand, and what I really try to do in my program, is I'm looking at leptin, cortisol, and melatonin. So when we can get these three hormones where they need to be, working on those cortisol melatonin patterns, especially, a lot of things are going to work themselves out, that you don't need to take a ton of supplements. So there's no supplement recommendations in my program. It's none of that. I don't tell you even need to get lab testing, none of that. It's more like, let's fix your lifestyle. So the morning is really that key crucial time. And then I tell them sunrise, sun is between 0 and 10 degrees. That's that signal to start creating that correct amount of cortisol. Give your body that strong signal with the food. Try to eat your breakfast within about 30 minutes of that time. And then get some UVA light, because UVA light is where we synthesize serotonin, dopamine, all those neurotransmitters. when those neurotransmitters, as well as all your sex hormones, thyroid hormones, all of that is synthesized in UVA light. Those signals go online, tell the brain, let's start this hormonal cascade. So those two pieces are super crucial. And those two things are things that most people are not doing, along with that nice protein rich kind of a carnivore meal in the morning, can make a huge difference for people, right? And if you're up before sunrise, I tell people wear some blue blockers, put on a pair of yellow blue blockers, because most of the lights in your home are going to be that, 5,700 Kelvin. They're going to be that unnatural alien light signal that's going to tell your brain it's the wrong time of day. So again, mitochondria are always trying to say, what time is it? Is it danger? They're sensors. Our mitochondria are sensors of our environment. They're looking for light. They're looking for inputs, all of these things. So if we're giving them a signal that it's noon in the middle of June, but it's actually 6 a.m. in the middle of January, we're going to create a circadian mismatch, and that's going to create an issue within the mitochondria. It's going to increase the space between those respiratory proteins in the mitochondria. It's going to cause them to swell. So again, the electron transport chain, those electrons can't tunnel through there properly. Your body can't make enough ATP, not making good cellular water. So really my program is focusing on how do I optimize mitochondria? So that morning routine is important. Lunch, that protein is very important, that high quality animal protein. People all the time, can I do your program as a vegetarian? You want to eat like 30 eggs a day? Yeah. You can't do it as a vegan, but as a vegetarian, you're going to be eating a lot of eggs and it's probably not going to be optimal for you. So protein lunch, protein dinner. I have most people start off the program because they're so leptin resistant. I don't want them doing a lot of fasting. Breakfast is a non-negotiable. If you're not hungry for lunch or dinner, don't force it. But I really don't encourage fasting in those first 21 days. And again, we're trying to work to get cortisol and melatonin back where they need to be. So the evening routine is important too. You want to stop eating at sunset because your body can't make melatonin if it's making cortisol, right? So when we eat, a little bit of cortisol is synthesized. So you don't want to be eating when you need to have melatonin starting. So no eating after sunset, blue blockers after sunset. Again, understanding how the brain releases hormones in response to specific light frequencies. If you're in front of your TV or on your phone scrolling at 10 o'clock at night, your body still thinks it's daytime and you're still making cortisol. You can't make that melatonin. And guess what melatonin does? Melatonin brings those respiratory proteins closer together, brings them down in size so that electrons can tunnel more efficiently. We improve our mitochondrial function. So if you really want deep healing and for those hormones to come back online, we need our body naturally making all this melatonin. And then you also want leptin to dock to the hypothalamus while we're sleeping so we can keep bringing those levels down. So my program really is those are the basic outlines. I've got a ton of other stuff in there about improving your cellular hydration, the way that your body holds on to water, understanding deuterium management. I mean, it's a pretty intensive course about all these things, but that's really the gist of it is like, I want people to work on these really super basic things that most, other programs are not even going to talk to you about. They just want to give you a meal. I'm not going to give you a meal plan. My program does not have a meal plan. You don't need a freaking meal plan, just eat meat, if you want to have some produce, make sure it's seasonal and local and have it as a condiment. Like I said in the beginning of the conversation, flip it. Meat is the main thing. The plants are the condiment, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to eat them. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the gist of how I instruct people to do this protocol. And I talk about cold therapy too, and how that can help bring down leptin and how to do that safely for your hormones. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I love that program because like I said, I've had people that want to lose weight, but then they see their Hashimoto's antibodies go dramatically down, right? They have other chronic health issues that just kind of go away because they are addressing these other things and the way the brain works.
Yeah. Awesome. I did have a question about grounding. Now, if you're outside, but you're on like flagstones and things like that, does that count? Or you have to be on like dirt and grass and things?
Concrete usually will work. Asphalt will not work. I have there's a company called Intuition Physician, and she has this little meter that you can actually test to see if you're grounded.
Okay.
So I like tested all the little areas on my property. You usually can't ground on like a deck, wooden deck. But usually concrete you can, but asphalt is the one surface that you can't ground on.
Okay.
And if it's wet, you conduct even more electrons.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just walking around barefoot in your house, probably not going to do it.
No, unless you're like, I'm downstairs, I'm in the basement, and I've tested the floor down here, and the floor is grounded in the basement. Okay. So if you have a concrete floor in your basement, a lot of times those are grounded. But if you're, on a second or third level, you're more than likely not going to be grounded. Sometimes concrete balconies are actually grounded. But yeah, that company is called Intuition Physician, and you can just test different surfaces. I have grounding shoes. So of course, I had to test those to make sure they actually work. Cause I like to go hiking, and I'll wear my grounding shoes while I'm hiking so I can gather even more electrons. So yeah, it's kind of a fun game to play of like, how much energy can I pull into my body? Because we always think of like, it's food, but really we're only supposed to get like 1/3 of our energy from food. The other 2/3 is light and magnetism, sunlight on the skin and magnetism from the earth. Cause how the heck do you think our ancestors survived all that time without food? They lived outdoors connected to the earth. And they lived in these electron-rich environments that we're completely disconnected from these days, completely disconnected. And then you put a cell phone in your hand, and you're completely, pulling out those electrons from your body. You're completely destroying that magnetism within your body.
So cell phones will strip that out?
Yeah, there's non-native EMF is another topic that I talk about a lot in my course, and how to mitigate that. Dr. Gerald Pollack is the father of, water, talks about structured water. He's fascinating. His book, The Fourth Phase of Water, I highly recommend reading. And it's just a beautiful book. But he's actually done, our bodies are 99% water molecule, and mitochondria, the outer membrane of the mitochondria, are surrounded with water. And then one of the things the mitochondria does is create this cellular water, structured water within the body. So he's done experiments in his lab where he has shown that exposing the body to non-native EMF, to Wi-Fi, it actually takes that water down in the body by 15 to 20%. So what we need, that cellular water, for energy. It's like a gel substance in our body that is like a battery that our body runs on that. And so, yeah, cell phones, Wi-Fi, my house is hardwired. We've got shielding paint. I mean, I'm kind of the tinfoil hat lady, but it does make a huge difference in how well your mitochondria function. And it's an overlooked thing, along with blue light. People are like, oh, the blue light. But when you understand how it works with the brain and what it does, that confusing signaling to the brain, and you understand that you can actually have an elevation in glucose in the absence of food, but in the presence of blue light. There's studies on this now that show this. You're like, wait a second, there might be something to this light story after all. Same thing with non-native EMF. It also floods the cell with calcium, right? So Dr. Martin Pall is someone who's done a ton of research on this and shown this, but this data has been hidden from us, right? Just like the food data, just like we hear all the Ansel Keys stuff, and like that's the same thing has been done with non-native EMF by big tech. And it's another crisis, right? It's another crisis. And our kids, I think, are getting sicker and sicker, number one, because of the food, but also because they have these phones. They're slamming themselves with blue light and non-native EMF. And now we've got early puberty, hormonal issues. Yeah, people are more and more confused these days. And there's a story about food, but food is a light form. Like I say, food is a form of light. If you are putting in a confusing light signal to your body, like seed oils, you are creating mitochondrial damage. You are creating damage in your body. So it's kind of fun that I talk about all this stuff now, because it's taken me out of like some of the diet wars. Like I said, I'm kind of a covert agent, right? For big meat, I guess.
Yeah, that's it.
I wish Big Meat would send me some paychecks. Haven't gotten a single one, by the way.
Yeah.
I know you feel the same way.
Yeah.
but when you understand these other facets of the body, you know that, again, we're only really supposed to get 1/3 of our energy from food. The other 2/3 are light and magnetism. It kind of takes some of that fight away from the food, and you can settle it. Like, yeah, meat is the only food that you're really able to access year round. That makes sense. All the other stuff, go ahead and infight about it. Have it if you want. If it doesn't work for you, cool. But let's look at some of these other facets also when it comes to our mitochondria and our overall health.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. All right. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I loved hearing about that and the leptin protocol. It's something that I see every day in the clinic as a major factor for people's health, hormonally, weight, and otherwise. And that's something that we have to combat very directly as well. And that's something that we have to have that talk with people, is like, you don't get carbs anymore. Those are gone. Those are out of your life. And so, so that's great. And where can people find you and check out your work?
Yeah. So just on Instagram, it's at Sarah Kleiner Wellness. I have a podcast called the Evolving Wellness Podcast. My YouTube channel is Sarah Kleiner Wellness YouTube channel. And those are the easiest ways. Right now, I'm kind of revamping my website. So yeah, those are the best ways to reach out, to find me. All my courses, all those things are linked off of that Instagram page. And so, yeah,
awesome.
Reach out.
And we'll put the links in the description as well. So if people want to go down there, they can check you out. Sarah, thank you so much for coming by. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great to see you again. And so happy.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon.
All right.
Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.